You're listening to Murder Not Murdering with Erin,
And Autumn,
a true crime podcast about murder and murdering.
but we are not murderers.
Scandal, secrets, betrayal, and murder. You know the drill. 2 cases, 2 storytellers, and countless twists along the way. This is Murder Not Murdering with Erin and
Autumn.
welcome back, listeners, because tonight the truth is stranger and deadlier than fiction.
Ooh,
Ooh, what do you guys think about that? We tried a new intro.
I like it.
You like it.
I like it.
Oh, yeah. I was telling Autumn what vocal stems were earlier, so now she's obsessed.
It's true.
You should have heard our test recording right before this. It was beautiful, stunning, amazing. Couldn't have gone better.
I know. I'm just the best.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Keep you on your feet.
Yep. That's it. So anyways, what's new with you, dude?
Not a whole lot. Just very thankful that it's starting to get nice again. It's just nothing beats a Seattle summer.
It is facts.
It's just so beautiful
It's
and
beautiful and green
green
yes.
and there's water and I mean it's just and not the kind that comes from the sky. It's the kind that's in the water, like the lake and the ocean and
Yeah.
all that. It's just a nice time.
No, I mean, I feel like that's how we hook people, right? You come
It's
in,
true.
you get to see this glorious summer, and that's how we get you.
Beautiful Mount Rainier views from anywhere you turn and then the doom and gloom.
I love it. I love the doom and gloom.
I
I'm
do
here
too.
for it.
But we're
we're
born and raised. Yes.
Oh, gross. We said that at the same time.
Yes, we did. But we are. So we appreciate that. I mean, there's nothing better also than a cozy cup of coffee while you're reading a book and like listening to the rain. I mean, you can't beat it. But also
No.
don't move here. There's too many people. So just kidding.
Yeah, can you not? I
Don't
mean,
rain on our parade. Okay. We just
to
got
be
to keep
fair,
it secret.
we do have a lot of murderers knocking people off.
Yes,
So I guess we
do.
might need an influx of people at that point.
I mean, Gary Ridgway, Ted Bundy.
They did
to
some
name a
damage, just
couple.
saying. Yeah.
There's more than that, but we'll just leave it there for maybe future cases.
I don't know. I say we are known for really good music, really good coffee, which is not Starbucks, just so
yeah,
you
not
know.
Starbucks.
Anybody from Seattle is anti-Starbucks. Just that is a fact.
I don't know if I would call them anti-Starbucks because I do know some people that are
But
like
most will
diehards
avoid.
for Starbucks.
But most people will avoid Starbucks. Starbucks is mostly like sugar, and I think their coffee is really bitter. It's like overly roasted. I just think that if you want to get good coffee, we have amazing coffee shops everywhere. Literally,
See,
coffee culture is a thing.
I'm not into coffee shops. I'm into the baristas, like the coffee stands.
Yeah, she likes the naked ones, the ones that show their boobs, and
Actually, you know what? Make that money, girls. I'm not stopping at those ones just
get
because.
your bikini baristas, man.
Yeah, but I get your bag, girls, if that's what you want to do. Like there is nothing wrong with that. But I prefer the like little stands. And when I was living in Linwood, which was now like years ago.
Yeah.
And every time I'm in town, there's a specific one. It's called Gourmet Latte. Shout out to my Gourmet Latte girls because they are amazing. I kid you not. Like they still remember me and Dustin. Anytime we roll through, they know my coffee order. They know his coffee order. Like they are the best. And I mean, there's something special about like your baristas knowing who you are and still knowing who you are like years later.
I think that's part of like the coffee culture here, you
Mhm.
know, is that you do get to know the people. You're spending time waiting for your coffee drink. They ask how your day was and what you're doing. And, you know, we have a lot of like coffee stands in, like, more of the outside of Seattle, but, like, in
Mhm.
Seattle proper, everything's pretty walkable as far as that
Yeah,
goes.
that's why
I ha
she goes to coffee shops. There's not really coffee shops where I live. They're all,
I
like,
can
little
go
stands.
I can walk to 4 within, like, 2 blocks.
Yeah. No,
They're everywhere here. But, but that's what I love is you have options and, and people are fiercely loyal to their particular coffee place that they like to go
true.
to. I go to a place called Fresh Flowers often or Moonshot Coffee. Those are like my 2 jams in my neighborhood. But it's like I love that. I love a cold rainy day going into a warm shop where you can grab your coffee and, it's just the smells, the everything. It's all part of that culture that we've got going on here. But outside of that, it is sunny as fuck right now, and we are
Mhm.
loving that part of it.
Love it.
I mean, very outdoorsy, I will say. We are very, very outdoorsy around here, and I love that part that you can just go out. Your mountains are within an hour drive. You can take these incredible hikes. You can see everything. It's just I love it. I love how green it is in the summertime. It's not like, places that you go to that are, brown and everything's dead or whatever. That's not my vibe. I am
I
not a
love that
desert
for
girly.
you. I am not a hiker.
Yeah. No, but I like hiking.
Mhm.
I hike for both of us.
Yep. I'm not me. Nope. I don't like it.
No, but you do like a nice view.
I do like a nice view. Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I like walking, but I do not like hiking.
I like hiking. I like the adventure of it.
Lots of
Um,
people do. It's just
yeah.
not for me.
Yeah. I also like tiring out my dogs, so that is
Plus,
helpful.
when you get to be older, people, you don't do things you don't like anymore. Like, I don't like hiking. I'm not wasting my time doing that. I'll
Well,
meet
that's
you
what
at
I
the
think it is
bottom.
about your 40s. Your 40s are your time of like no. Like, I think that now if somebody asks me to do something that really don't want to, I just am super honest and I'm just like, "No, that's not really for me. No, I don't wanna do that. No, I'm unavailable." I just think it's
Don't call
really
me.
well, I don't go that far, but you know what I mean, though? It's like a time where you're just, like, comfortable in your own skin that you don't feel like you have to yes people. You don't feel like that obligation that you did before. I also think mindsets of women is also changing where we are always meant to be accommodating. That way that you were brought up is changing now. It's not about being accommodating. It's about doing what the fuck you want and how you feel about things. And so I love that. I'm here for it. I'm raising a daughter in that world, and that's what it is.
Well, my bonus son is an ally to us women. So,
Yeah. I think you can be polite, but at the same time, you don't have to bend over backwards for everything. That's that.
well,
Anyways,
yeah, we could go on a long tangent about all of
we could go
that,
on
but
a long tangent about it. I mean, how many times have we seen murders because girls were being polite?
I mean, also, even when
Kidnappings,
you're
all of
not
that.
even when you're not being rude and you're just saying you're being polite and you're saying no because you're a woman, people will be like, "Well, you're just a bitch."
Yes, yes, yes,
So, I
all the
mean,
time.
that's
I mean, we
really
see that
fucking
too.
hard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but no, you can say fucking no. Be rude. I don't care.
Be rude. As one of our favorite
Yeah, what
podcasts
do they say?
say, fuck politeness.
Fuck politeness. That's right.
Fun
Murder.
fact, I have a
My favorite
button
murder.
my favorite murder. I have a button on my denim jacket that says that. It says "fuck politeness," and I wore it to Lucy's school one time during conferences, and I was like afterward, I looked down and I'm like, "Oh my god, I have all my murder pins." There's, like, middle fingers on it, and I was like, "Jesus
Yeah.
Christ, Erin, get it
Fuck
together."
politeness. No, hell no. Girl, you a queen.
That was a moment. All right. Well, speaking of moments, we're going to get into Autumn's case here. And then afterward, I'm going all the way back to my old time crime ways. I'm going to take you back to the 1930s with a
Jesus.
famous case that has a direct connection to a case I did a few months ago. So that's going to be exciting.
She already sounds excited.
I'm excited about my case, but first we're going to hear Autumn's, and I will be equally as excited for that.
I don't know.
I'm excited, Autumn.
It's from Unsolved Mysteries.
That's your favorite.
It sure is. I'm going to get into it so she can get excited about her case.
I already am.
Yes.
I'll just
But
cut
first you
you
have to
off and
suffer.
read mine.
Yeah. First you
The
have to
title
suffer
of my
through mine.
episode is No, let's find out this unsolved mysteries mystery and hopefully it's solved.
I mean, it's
No, it's
called
not.
Unsolved
Okay, fine.
Mysteries.
Let's get into it.
Buckle up.
Buckled.
Here's an adventure for you. In the early hours of January 2nd, 1995, two college students parked beside a quiet Georgia lake believed they were completely alone. It was just after midnight at a place locals called The Point, a small peninsula that stretched into Lake Juliette, north of Macon. The kind of place young couples went for privacy, for conversation, for a moment away from campus life. But sometime after midnight, headlights appeared in the darkness, and within seconds, 19 gunshots shattered the silence. What investigators would eventually uncover was one of the most chilling truths imaginable. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't revenge. The murders were completely random. A 20-year-old stranger later admitted he killed them simply to see if he could do it and get away with it. And the person who ultimately helped crack the case open was his own father, a longtime FBI agent.
Whoa.
This is the story of Grant Hendrickson, Michelle Cartagena, and Andrew Cook. This is one of those stories that leaves you sitting in silence because there's no clear motive to hold on to, no explanation that makes it easier to understand, just violence for the sake of violence. And honestly, I think those cases are sometimes the hardest to process.
I agree, because you want to rationalize everything.
Mm-hmm. Because if someone kills for money, jealousy, anger, or revenge, our brains can at least trace the logic, even when it's horrifying. But random violence? That's different. It forces you to confront the reality that sometimes innocent people simply cross paths with the wrong person at the wrong moment. And in this case, that moment lasted only seconds. Before we get into it, I want to quickly note that portions of this episode discuss graphic violence.
Yikes. Okay.
So let's go back to Georgia, January of 1995. 22-year-old Grant Patrick Hendrickson and 19-year-old Michelle Cartagena were students at Mercer University in Macon, Georgia. By all accounts, they were young, normal college kids just trying to enjoy their lives. It was winter break season. Classes were out, and on the night of January 1st, heading into January 2nd, the couple drove out to Lake Juliette in Monroe County. Lake Juliette was known as a quiet spot outside the city, remote, dark, surrounded by woods, a place where people camped, fished, parked, or just escaped for a while. One area near the water was known locally as the Point, and sometime around midnight, Grant and Michelle parked there together. Then another car arrived. A 1987 Honda CRX rolled onto the peninsula and parked nearby. Inside was 20-year-old Andrew Allen Cook. What happened next unfolded with terrifying speed. According to investigators, Cook opened fire on the couple using an AR-15 rifle from about 40 feet away.
Oh my God.
14 shots. Then he moved closer. and fired 5 more rounds using a 9mm Ruger handgun. Grant Hendrickson and Michelle Cartanegna were struck multiple times and killed inside the car. There had been no confrontation, no robbery, no argument, no warning. Cook did not know them. Investigators would later state there was absolutely no interaction between Andrew and the victims before the murders began. After the shooting, Andrew walked to the passenger side of the vehicle and pulled Michelle from the car. He dragged her body roughly 40 feet away. Then he partially undressed her. He knelt between her legs and spit tobacco juice onto her body in what prosecutors later believed was an attempt to stage the crime scene as some kind of sexual assault or robbery.
That is so disgusting.
Disgusting. Then he got back into his Honda CRX and disappeared into the night. Around Lake Juliette, several campers had parked with couples and they heard the gunfire echo through the darkness. One nearby couple later told police they had noticed an older Honda CRX parked near the entrance to the point shortly before the shooting. Then they saw headlights move farther down the peninsula. Moments later, gunshots exploded through the night. And afterward, they watched the CRX speed away from the area. But in 1995, that wasn't much to go on. The next morning, campers discovered the bodies and called the authorities. The crime scene was brutal. Investigators recovered 223 shell casings from the AR-15 and additional 9mm casings from the handgun. And then there was one small detail that would become critically important years later: the tobacco spit left on Michelle's leg. Inside that saliva, investigators were able to recover DNA. Now remember, this was the mid-1990s. DNA technology existed, but it was nowhere near as fast or expansive as it is today. So investigators began building a profile of their possible suspect. They believed the killer likely chewed tobacco, owned or had access to an AR-15 rifle, owned or had access to a 9mm Ruger handgun, and drove an older Honda CRX. But Monroe County investigators had a huge problem. None of it pointed to a specific person. And because the murders appeared completely random, there was no personal connection to trace. No angry ex-boyfriend, no known enemies, no obvious suspect. The investigation dragged on for nearly 2 years. Authorities interviewed countless people. Dozens of potential suspects voluntarily submitted blood or saliva samples. Weapons were examined and ruled out one after another. And slowly, leads dried up. Then, in the fall of 1996, a Georgia Bureau of Investigation agent named Randy Upton decided to try something different. Instead of focusing on relationships or motive, he focused on the weapons, specifically the AR-15. Agent Upton obtained a list of more than 100 people in the Macon area who had purchased AR-15 rifles between 1985 and 1995 from a popular local gun store. Then he began contacting them one by one. One of those names was Andrew Cook. And from the very first conversation, something felt off. On November 27th, 1996, Agent Upton contacted Cook and mentioned that records showed he owned an AR-15 during the time of the murders. Andrew immediately claimed he had gotten rid of the rifle in April of 1994. But there was a problem. Records showed Andrew hadn't even purchased the rifle until August of 1994. Agent Upton caught the contradiction instantly. And according to records, Andrew became defensive almost immediately.
Surprise.
He mentioned that his father was an FBI agent. He said he didn't have to cooperate. And when Agent Upton,
Wow.
yeah, talk about entitled there. And when Agent Upton requested a saliva sample, Andrew suddenly needed to talk to his father first. That alone wasn't enough for an arrest, but investigators kept digging. And what they uncovered next painted a devastating picture. Andrew had pawned his AR-15 rifle only 5 months after the murders. Investigators also learned that because Andrew had been too young to legally purchase a handgun himself in 1993, he
No.
had another person buy a 9mm Ruger pistol for him, the exact same type that was used in the murders. And then came the witness statements. One of Andrew's coworkers from a diaper factory later testified that the two had been discussing the worst thing you ever did. Cook casually admitted that he had killed someone with an AR-15.
What?
I mean, Erin.
What's the worst thing you've ever done? Oh yeah, I killed
Specific.
somebody.
Like, no, he was even
Jesus.
specific. He said he killed them with an AR-15. Like, he was so specific.
He wanted to get caught then.
I just think
At
he
the
might have been
diaper
kind of
factory.
dumb, right?
I feel like he was trying to impress somebody. You know
I
what I
mean,
mean? By like bragging, being like, "Oh,
I
I've
don't
done
think
this."
so.
No?
I think he was just that dumb.
Okay then.
The coworker thought he was joking, but when he
I mean,
asked
wouldn't you?
why, I mean, yes, I'd be like, okay. But when he asked why, Andrew reportedly answered, to see if I could do it and get away with it.
Wow.
Imagine hearing that in casual conversation and not realizing you're listening to a real confession. But the next day, things got stranger. The coworker said Andrew received a page at work, stepped away to return the call, and came back looking completely pale, as white as a ghost. I mean, what are the odds of the timing of that, too?
For real.
Andrew spit out the tobacco he'd been chewing and reportedly said, "That's a DNA test right there. So they got my ass." Another friend later testified Andrew said he needed to leave town because things were getting hot. At that point, investigators knew they were getting close. But the breakthrough in this case would come from someone and somewhere deeply personal. Andrew Cook's father.
Thank God.
John Cook had spent nearly 29 years as an FBI agent. And until investigators contacted him in December of 1996, he apparently had no reason to believe his son was connected to the Lake Juliette murders. Agent Upton asked if he could help locate Andrew. John Cook agreed. That night, after paging his son several times, because the cell phones weren't a thing.
Back in my day.
Right, the pagers. Andrew finally called him back around 11 p.m. And what followed is honestly one of the most haunting conversations in this entire case. John Cook told his son the GBI wanted to speak with him about the murders and asked if he knew anything about them. Andrew reportedly replied, "Daddy, I can't tell you. You're one of
Daddy.
them." Well, he's from the South. But,
Okay.
I mean, and this is documented, so this is what he really
Sure.
said.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
He said, "Daddy, I can't tell you. You're one of them. You're a cop." John told him he was his father first. At first, he thought maybe Andrew had witnessed the crime. Maybe he'd been nearby.
He
So
hoped.
yeah, I would thinking you wouldn't want your child to have done
No,
this.
God, no.
So he asked if he had been there during the shooting. Andrew said yes. John asked if he saw who did it. Again, yes. Then finally, after a pause, John Cook asked the question directly. Did you shoot them? And Andrew answered, yes. At first, Andrew tried to frame it as self-defense. He claimed he had argued with Grant Hendrickson and thought Grant had pointed a gun at him.
Look at the
That
evidence, though. Come on now.
this is his
His
story.
dad's an FBI agent.
This is his story. Then he supposedly realized later it was only a pellet gun. But even his own father didn't believe the story.
No.
And
Me
then
either.
Andrew, no. And then Andrew said something even more alarming.
God.
He planned to run, to disappear. John Cook later said he feared his son might kill himself. Imagine being an FBI agent your entire adult life and suddenly realizing your own child may have committed a random double murder. I mean,
That's awful.
awful.
But
Then,
you know, I think the thing is, though, is all parents want the best for their kids. All parents want to think that they would never do something like that.
of
So
course.
you wouldn't naturally think that
I
your
mean, and up
child
until
was
that point,
capable.
his child was just a normal teenager.
Jesus Christ. Poor guy.
Yeah. The next day, John Cook contacted his FBI supervisor and then went directly to the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. He told investigators everything.
Good.
And almost simultaneously, Andrew Cook's life was unraveling somewhere else. On December 5th, 1996, Andrew was arrested by a game warden for illegally shooting deer and turkeys out of season and for giving a false name. Completely unrelated charges.
Not for shooting people
No.
in any season.
No. But while he sat in custody, Agent Upton arrived to question him about the Lake Juliette murders. And before Upton could even say much, Andrew exploded defensively. According to testimony, Andrew blurted out, "It's been 2 years since the murders, and you guys don't have anything. I had a CRX, I had an AR-15, I had a Ruger P89. You guys are going to try to frame me."
Wow.
Okay.
Frame him.
Yeah.
They have nothing better to do with their time.
No. I mean, and your daddy, he went to investigators. So, I mean, sure. Investigators hadn't even accused him yet.
The thing is, he's confessed twice to people. He confessed once to the diaper factory guy and
Yeah.
once to his daddy.
Mhm. His daddy.
Oh my God.
Then Andrew demanded a lawyer and asked for his father. Later that day, after Andrew was transferred to Monroe County, John Cook was allowed to speak privately with his son. Both men were reportedly crying. John hugged him, and then he confronted Andrew again because he knew the self-defense story didn't make sense. That's when Andrew finally admitted the truth. There had been no argument, no pellet gun, no confrontation at all. According to John Cook's testimony, Andrew said, "I pulled in, the car was already there, and I just stopped and shot them." This sentence is terrifying in its simplicity. No rage, no panic, no reason, just I stopped and shot them. Andrew admitted he moved Michelle's body afterward to make the crime scene appear like a robbery or sexual assault. And with that, the mystery of Lake Juliette was finally solved. Investigators recovered the AR-15 and Ruger handgun from the people Andrew had sold them to. Ballistic testing confirmed both were the murder weapons. Then the DNA from the tobacco matched Andrew's as well. The odds of another Caucasian male matching that profile were reportedly about 1 in 20,000. The evidence was overwhelming. In 1997, Andrew Cook was indicted on multiple murder charges. And in March of 1998, after a jury trial, he was convicted of 2 counts of malice murder and 2 counts of felony murder. The jury sentenced him to death for the murder of Michelle Cartanegna. He also received a consecutive life sentence for the murder of Grant Hendrickson. Over the next 15 years, Andrew's attorneys filed appeal after appeal through the Georgia courts, federal courts, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and ultimately the United States Supreme Court. Some appeals argued ineffective counsel, others focused on sentencing. But ultimately, every appeal failed.
Yeah, 'cause, he murdered somebody just to do it.
Just to do it.
So why would that person should ever be allowed to be out with the public ever again?
And on February 21st, 2013, Andrew Cook was scheduled for execution in Georgia. That night, he became the first inmate in Georgia executed using a single drug pentobarbital protocol after the state moved away from its previous 3-drug method. He was 38 years old. For his last meal, he requested steak, baked potatoes, potato wedges, fried shrimp, lemon meringue pie, and a soda. Before his execution, Andrew apologized to both families. But one line from his final statement stayed with many people. He said, "I'm not going to ask you to forgive me. I can't even do it myself." And honestly, there's something deeply bleak about that statement. Not because it excuses anything, it doesn't, but because even he seemed unable to fully understand why he destroyed so many lives that night. Grant Hendrickson was 22 years old. Michelle Cartanegna was only 19. 2 college students sitting beside a lake on a winter night, probably believing they had decades of life ahead of them. Instead, they crossed paths with someone who viewed human life almost like an experiment. And in some ways, that makes this case especially haunting because it isn't just the violence. It's how ordinary the beginning was. A parked car, a quiet lake, a random stranger arriving in the dark. Because stories like this force us to confront something uncomfortable. Sometimes evil doesn't come with warning signs visible to the outside world. Sometimes it looks like a 22-year-old guy driving a Honda CRX. A guy with coworkers, friends, parents who loved him. A father who spent his career enforcing the law, only to eventually testify against his own son. And honestly, I can't imagine the devastation of that position. John Cook reportedly believed he was doing the right thing.
I agree.
And I agree. But I think there's probably a pain that never fully leaves after a moment like that. Because there are no winners in a story like this. Not after something so senseless. Not after 2 people, completely innocent, lost their lives for no reason at all. And today, more than 30 years later, people still speak their names. Grant Hendrickson, Michelle Cartanegna. 2 young lives that should have been and could have had so much more time. My sources were Unsolved Mysteries, Murderpedia, the Statesboro Herald, CBS News, and the Macon Telegraph.
Ugh, that was a frustrating one.
So fucking frustrating.
And again, it's like, why? Just like, why did we have to go through that? Like, you know what I mean? It just doesn't. It
I
just
saw
to
it on
do it,
Unsolved
just to do it.
Mysteries, and
Fuck
it
off.
wasn't solved and I was like, wow, and it was just such a weird story.
Yeah.
Then I started digging. I was like Googling and digging afterward, and I was like, oh my, it was solved. Like that was a surprise to me. And then how it got solved was wild to me. I'm like, "Oh my
Yeah,
god, his fucking dad," and I
and
mean,
thank
Jesus.
God. Thank God
Yeah,
his
like, thank
dad
God his dad did the right thing.
did the right thing because often, I mean, we've seen it in past episodes that, folks in law enforcement protect their children, and you can understand why they would want to, but it's not the right thing to do, you
It's not
know?
the right thing to do.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Autumn.
You're very welcome.
It was shockingly a little graphic even for your usual
Yeah, like,
cases.
I don't normally get that graphic, but
I
there was
do.
parts in it. Yes, you do.
Because we saw bodies on my end, but
Yes.
not in this one, not in this one. But
Mhm.
the case I am doing tonight, like I said, has a direct connection to a case I did just a few months ago. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
This case is called Sex, Scandal, and the Seaside Murder. In March 1935, one of Britain's most famous architects was found bludgeoned in his drawing room in a quiet seaside villa. Within days, the nation became obsessed with the glamorous younger wife, her teenage chauffeur lover. Whispers of cocaine, adultery, and a murder trial so sensational, newspapers treated it like theater. This is the story of Alma Rattenbury, the woman the tabloids called a femme fatale, a monster, a seductress, and finally, a tragedy. And the question at the center of it all is who really killed Francis Rattenbury? There are cases where the victim disappears into the background almost immediately, and this is one of them. Because the moment the public first saw Alma Rattenbury sitting in the dock at the Old Bailey in 1935, perfectly dressed, bobbed hair immaculate, smoking cigarettes and speaking with a cool composure, the press lost its collective mind. One paper reportedly sent a theater critic instead of a crime correspondent because the proceedings felt less like a murder trial and more like a scandalous West End production. And they weren't entirely wrong. The story had everything the tabloids craved: an aging millionaire architect, a much younger glamorous wife, a teenage chauffeur, open adultery, drugs, violence, confession, betrayal, and eventually suicide. The newspapers practically vibrated with excitement. But before Alma became Britain's most infamous adulteress, she was a talented Canadian girl with enormous ambition. She was born Alma Victoria Wolfe in British Columbia sometime around 1897, though her exact birth year became fuzzy over time, I think purposely.
Mhm. I think so too.
Her father was a gold prospector who reportedly disappeared. Her mother remarried, and Alma took the surname Clark. By all accounts, Alma was charismatic, musical, restless. She married young, and her husband sadly died in the First World War. She remarried Compton Pakenham. While he was on leave from the army in London, he met and began a relationship with Alma. But Pakenham was married to Phyllis Price in 1915. But by October 1918, he wrote a letter to his wife informing her that their marriage was over. Alma was cited in the Pakenham's divorce in 1920. And in 1920, the couple immigrated to the United States of America, claiming on their Ellis Island entrance papers that they were just a young Irish couple. Pakenham found work as a lecturer. Autumn, you're gonna love this part.
Mhm.
Pakenham found work as a lecturer on Japan, claiming to have attended Oxford University and calling himself Dr. Pakenham. But he had never attended a university or held any degrees. Alma gave piano lessons in contrast to her pre-war status as a concert soloist. The couple married in 1921 and they had a son, Christopher, in July. However, Alma left Pakenham and returned to her native Canada in March 1922. Their marriage formally ended in divorce in 1925. She reportedly performed at the Toronto Symphony Orchestra and later earned money teaching music and composing songs under the name Lausanne. And then she met the man who would alter the course of her life forever. Francis Rattenbury was already famous. If you've ever seen the Grand Parliament buildings in Victoria, British Columbia, or the Empress Hotel towering over the harbor, you have seen his work. And if you haven't, the Empress Hotel is so pretty. So look it up. He was brilliant. He was wealthy. He was older than Alma by roughly 30 years. And he was married, which seems to be her type, I guess. Which in this story rarely stops anyone from doing anything.
This is accurate.
Their affair caused an immediate scandal in Canada. He flaunted her publicly and even took her back to his home where his wife, and this was in a newspaper, Florence, would be taunted by the sounds of their lovemaking. That's how salacious this was.
Disgusted.
Francis divorced his wife and married Alma in 1925. The gossip was vicious enough that the couple eventually moved to England to start over. They settled in Bournemouth in a large seaside home called Villa Madeira. And at first glance, it should have been idyllic. But behind closed doors, the marriage was already rotting. Was built on lies, but, whatever.
Whatevs.
Whatevs. The thing about the Rattenbury marriage is that everyone involved seems to have been deeply lonely. Francis was aging, alcoholic, depressed, and increasingly isolated, whereas Alma was vibrant and social, flirtatious, and desperate for stimulation. Their young son, John, was around but not getting a lot of attention. The house itself became emotionally strange. By many accounts, Francis and Alma eventually stopped sharing a bedroom altogether. And then there was the money. Francis's finances had declined sharply by 1930. The great architect who once designed monumental buildings now spent much of his time drinking whiskey in Bournemouth while arguments over household expenses escalated. At one point, during a violent argument, Francis reportedly struck Alma hard enough to leave her with a black eye. And into this increasingly toxic household walked an 18-year-old boy named George Stoner. The couple advertised.
Kind of last name is that?
Yeah, it's his last name. The couple advertised for a live-in servant in the Bournemouth Daily Echo in 1934. George answered the ad. He was young, sheltered, awkward. And according to later reporting, he had lived a very isolated life before arriving at the Villa Madeira. Within weeks, Alma and George began an affair. That's right, that 18-year-old boy, she was like, get on over here. And here's where the public became utterly transfixed. Francis knew all about it. Not only did he know, he tolerated it. The French term used repeatedly in reports was mari complaisant, a complacent husband, a husband who accepted the affair. Imagine the atmosphere in that house. An aging architect, his glamorous wife, her teenage lover living under the same roof. They even ate meals together, had drinks together. But arguments simmered beneath the surface, and outside was just a sleepy English seaside. Inside the Villa Madeira, everyone was trapped in a pressure cooker. And then came March 24th, 1935, the night everything exploded. Francis Rattenbury was asleep in his armchair, and this detail made the crime feel especially brutal to the public because he wasn't standing, he wasn't fighting, he wasn't even awake. He was sleeping in the drawing room when someone struck him repeatedly in the head with a wooden carpenter's mallet. The blows were catastrophic. One account described the attack as so violent that his false teeth were knocked out. Blood soaked the carpet, blood covered the chair, and somehow in the chaos after the attack, Francis was moved into a downstairs bedroom. When the doctor arrived by taxi in the middle of the night, Alma was frantic, intoxicated, incoherent. She had to be sedated by the local doctor who had returned to the villa at 4 a.m. with half a grain of morphine. At first, there was confusion about what had happened. Had Francis fallen? Had he hit his head on the piano? But once the doctors shaved his head and examined his wounds, it became horrifyingly clear. This was no accident. Someone tried to smash his skull in. And then Alma said something extraordinary. According to reports, she declared she had done it. Police later stated she confessed repeatedly. One alleged statement was chilling. "That is right. I did it deliberately, and I would do it again." She was charged with grievous bodily harm with intent to murder. She later stated that she had no recollection of that night and could not remember signing any confessions. At the moment, though, the case appeared solved. A younger wife, an older husband, teenage lover, money problems, confession, open and shut. Except it absolutely was not, because a second confession was coming, and that second confession would transform the case into international obsession. A few days after the attack, Francis died from his injuries. It is shocking to me that he lived that long.
Mm-hmm.
And then, in a strange turn of events, George Stoner confessed to the attack and consequential murder. He admitted to striking Francis with the mallet, and suddenly the authorities had two people confessing to the same murder. And even stranger, each confession contradicted each other. Alma claimed that she remembered little because she had been heavily sedated with morphine and alcohol after the attack. George, meanwhile, increasingly appeared to portray himself as emotionally overwhelmed, obsessed with Alma, consumed by the dynamics in the villa. The tabloids devoured every detail, and the details became increasingly lurid. Reports surfaced that George allegedly had been given cocaine-laced sandwiches before the murder.
Jesus.
That's her lover, to hype him up.
That's just different.
Nothing like a cocaine sandwich, see?
Nothing like that.
The press portrayed Alma as a manipulative older seductress, corrupting a young innocent boy. One publication described her as Lady Macbeth. That's an old-time sick burn, just so you know. If you aren't a Shakespeare fan, it essentially is calling her a woman who manipulates and, for lack of a better phrase, browbeats her partner, usually associated with pursuing power or questioning their partner's masculinity.
Wait. Did you say that's a sick burn?
Yeah, it is. It's an old-timey sick burn.
Sick burn, guys.
Yeah, I'm hip.
Okay.
Other parts of the press would focus obsessively on her clothing, her beauty, her smoking, her drinking, and even her size in court. The actual murder became almost secondary. Britain wasn't simply watching a homicide trial, they were watching a morality play. And Alma had already been cast as the villain. By the time the trial opened at the Old Bailey in May 1935, crowds were lining up daily to get a seat. This was a spectacle. Newspapers described Alma endlessly. Her tailored clothing, her platinum blonde glamour, her poise, her emotional mood swings. The underlying message was clear. What kind of woman behaves like this? Not grieving enough, too attractive, too sexual, too modern, and perhaps most scandalous of all, too independent. The prosecution painted a toxic picture of the Villa Madeira. A decadent household, alcohol, adultery, manipulation, a teenager under Alma's influence. George Stoner was framed almost like a corrupted schoolboy led astray by an older temptress. At one point, the judge explicitly warned the jury not to convict Alma simply because they disliked her adultery. And that tells you how heavily the sexual aspect dominated the trial. Not the murder, the sex. The courtroom became obsessed with whether Alma morally deserved punishment, even if evidence against her was weak. Meanwhile, George sat beside her, young and visibly overwhelmed. And then came one of the oddest emotional turns in the entire case. After the jury acquitted Alma and convicted George, George reportedly cried out, "I'm glad she's been spared." It stunned
Jesus.
observers because even after conviction, even after facing execution, George appeared still devoted to her. That moment locked the public narrative permanently into place. Alma, the seductress, George, the doomed boy, and Francis, the pathetic husband. But reality was far messier than that. And here's where the case becomes fascinating. Because depending on who you believe, there are several possible versions of the murder. Version 1, Alma killed Francis during an explosive domestic confrontation. Version 2, George killed Francis out of jealousy, devotion, or rage. Version 3, the two acted together without explicitly planning a murder. And version 4, the one the newspapers preferred, was that Alma psychologically manipulated George into killing for her. I mean, cocaine sandwiches. But the evidence never cleanly fit any single narrative. Even confessions are complicated. Alma confessed first while heavily intoxicated and sedated, and later retracted much of it. George confessed only after Francis had died. And the physical reality of the attack, multiple devastating blows, suggests intense emotion, not cool calculation. The jury acquitted Alma in less than an hour, and that alone says a lot. Whatever the public believed morally about Alma, legally, evidence against her was shaky. George, however, was sentenced to death, though even there the jury recommended mercy. People were conflicted. They saw him simultaneously as a killer and as a manipulated young man consumed by infatuation. And then, just when the scandal could not become any more dramatic, Alma Rattenbury committed suicide in a truly horrific way. Only days after the trial ended, Alma traveled near Christchurch, carrying a knife, and there near the River Avon, she stabbed herself repeatedly in the chest, 6 times. 3 of the wounds pierced her heart. Even in death, the case remained theatrical and shocking. She left a note saying, "If I only thought it would help Stoner, I would stay." That line haunted the public. Was this love? Guilt? Despair? Manipulation until the very end? No one could decide. Her death transformed her from villain into tragic figure almost overnight. And in a deeply macabre detail, souvenir hunters later stole flowers from her grave and reportedly burglarized her home.
Wow.
The public had consumed the case so intensely they wanted physical pieces of it. George Stoner's death sentence was eventually commuted to life imprisonment after enormous public sympathy campaigns. More than 300,000 people reportedly signed petitions asking for mercy. Remember, this is before social media or any of that. And then something surprising happened. He didn't spend his life in prison. After serving only 7 years, he was released during World War II to join the British Army. He later married, had a daughter, and lived quietly in Bournemouth for decades. He rarely discussed the murder publicly, but years later, he finally commented on it, saying, "It was so long ago, and there was no other person to witness the actual event. The whole crime was committed on an emotional basis. Both I and the lady involved were in a highly emotional state. Our emotions were completely out of control." And honestly, this may be the clearest explanation anyone ever gave, because this case isn't really about a criminal mastermind. It's about emotional rot, loneliness, dependency, humiliation, obsession, power imbalance, and 3 people trapped in a deeply unhealthy domestic arrangement. The murder itself only lasted moments, but the emotional collapse leading into it probably took years. The Alma Rattenbury case endures because it feels almost fictional, a A seaside villa, a glamorous older woman, a teenage chauffeur lover, an aging architect bleeding to death in an armchair, confessions, a packed courtroom, and a suicide beside a river just days after an acquittal. But underneath the sensational headlines was something darker, a household where no one knew how to leave. And maybe that's why this story still fascinates nearly a century later. Because the most dangerous thing in the Villa Madeira wasn't the mallet, it was the emotional chaos long before anyone ever picked it up. And now, as I mentioned, there is a direct connection to a previous episode, and here it is.
I was waiting for this.
I'm going to leave this case on a happy note. John Rattenbury, the son of Alma and Francis, followed in his father's footsteps and became an architect in his own right. Losing his parents at such a young age was very hard, and he remembered everything about the night that it happened. He said, "I remember the night my father was murdered because the lights went on in the house and I woke up. Nobody would tell me what happened, but I had this cold feeling something terrible had occurred. In fact, it would be another year before he would learn the truth." He said, "I was too young to know, and everyone was afraid to tell me. Then one day, a boy at my school rather cruelly told me that my father had been murdered and my mother had killed herself. It was such a shock. I was told they had been on vacation." It was horrible.
Oh, that is really awful.
Yeah. To learn from a schoolmate at school. Just terrible. Anyway, then he was sent to boarding schools where he took an interest in architecture. He attended Oregon State University to study. Along the way, he came across some writings about Frank Lloyd Wright and his philosophy on connecting architecture with nature. Inspired, John eventually made his way to Taliesin, the home, architecture school, and community Wright had founded. Frank Lloyd Wright had endured his own share of tragedy, and I covered the disaster at Taliesin in a past episode, so do go check that out. It is horrific. But knowing that they both had this dark past may have brought them closer together, and Frank became both mentor and substitute father to John. Frank's wife also played a major role in John's life. In a way, it's comforting to know that he had that support after everything he had been through. John thrived at Taliesin. He became an important member of Wright's practice, working on many projects, including New York's Guggenheim Museum. And after Frank Lloyd Wright died in 1959, John helped co-found Taliesin Architects, completing Wright's projects and becoming known for his own designs that reflected the same belief that people should live in harmony with nature. He wrote books about Wright and architecture. He taught, and in 1997, he had the winning design of Life magazine's Dream House. He has since passed away, but is remembered for being kind and loving, a great husband and father, breaking the cycle and finding happiness after tragedy. My sources were Wikipedia, the Vancouver Sun, British Newspaper Archive, the Times Review, Kamloops Heritage, and newspaper archives of the time period.
That's wild.
And I like that it ended on a happy note.
Yeah, he wasn't traumatized at all.
Well, I'm sure he was traumatized, but through the
That
trauma
was sarcasm.
I mean, but through this trauma, he managed to make an incredible life, and he ended up having, I mean, they talk about how deeply in love he was with his wife, and his daughters said how what a wonderful father he was. So, and he had a great career. So, coming from this like really over the top situation with his mom being, from a lot of things I read, addicted to drugs and having affairs, and the husband was an alcoholic, and all of that turmoil and craziness to be wrapped up in, to come out of that and be able to break that cycle is pretty incredible, I think.
He
But
died in 2021.
yeah, yeah, not that long ago.
Not that long ago. He was 92 years old.
I know. It's crazy. I just thought it was kind of funny that after all of this, I was looking for quotes from him, and that's where I found that connection that he actually worked at Taliesin and everything, which is interesting. And if you haven't heard that case, it's fucking insane. So do check that out. It's a past episode. I thought that I did this case a while back because when I was in Victoria, BC, I was by the Empress Hotel and I found out the history and I researched it. It's been in my list for a long time. So I was glad that I did it and that I hadn't done it since I've done it now. But yeah, those were our cases. My case was pretty awful. Autumn's was pretty brutal this week.
Mhm.
We both went for some pretty brutal ones, and I got back to old time crime, which makes me happy.
Mhm.
So we will be back next week. New episodes always come out on Mondays. We're also on TikTok at mnm.pod. We're on Reddit. We also are on Instagram at Murder Not Murdering, where we do post pictures of the people involved. So you do get to see, put a face to the names. And like I said, new episodes out every Monday. We so appreciate you listening to us. Please tell your friends. We do this for fun, not for money. We don't make any money. We'd like to make money. Tell your friends. And we will be back again next week. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.
Bye.